Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today we're joined by Kris Grant, the CEO of ASPL, who oversees its management and consulting division. She's a mother of two and a previous leader of more than 50,000 staff across Asia Pacific. And today she's here to talk to us about burnout. Kris, thank you for joining today's live stream. Welcome.
Thank you, Daniel.
My pleasure. Now, you're the CEO of ASPL. You just mentioned a moment ago that pre-COVID you were doing 5 flights a week in and around Australia, around Asia. You're a mother of 2 and you formerly led a team of 50,000 people. Where's the cape? And are you Superwoman?
No, definitely not Superwoman, but I am pretty passionate about leadership and uplifting capability across all our clients, and really passionate about our people as well.
So today's conversation is about burnout, and according to the World Health Organization, burnout is a diagnosed disease now. And in America, it impacts the healthcare system by $190 billion a year. It leads to type 2 diabetes, it leads to coronary heart disease and high cholesterol, and in some cases, even death under the age of 45. Now, this has been well researched. From leading a team of 50,000 people, what were some of the signs of burnout that you've seen over the years?
I think some of the signs from an executive or even some of your managers or people is definitely lack of engagement. So it's like looking at their patterns of behavior and trying to work out and looking at your EQ as to why, they're experiencing some of these challenges. Lack of energy is obviously another absolute sign. And really not engaging with their team or with your vision or your passion is probably another sign.
For business people who are new into business, they're learning how to run their business, they're learning their systems and processes, they're now new leaders. How do they identify this disengagement? What are some of those early signs of disengagement?
I think that it's even more challenging now with the pandemic. So our coaches, for example, talk to leaders about ensuring that they touch base with the teams, and again, looking for those shifted behaviours. That's probably the quickest way. Heightening your EQ skills and really delving into and asking some of those questions, really challenging with the whole working from home, I think. And obviously the blurred line between obviously your home life and work life.
This is a big challenge. So people who have moved from the office to home, the leader's not there, the leader doesn't get to see them. Yeah. How does the leader do it now? Obviously, we're using a lot of technology like Zoom. How are the leaders adapting to this new environment?
Well, leaders are pretty fatigued from the pandemic anyway. A lot of them have had to go straight into contingency mode, and now they've got obviously priorities, given whether it's budget restrictions or even still delivering against policy. And I think that they need to always recognize that they still have to connect with their people.
A moment ago, you mentioned about they're not connecting with the vision and the mission.
Yes.
How does this impact the overall operation of a company when people disengage from that vision and mission?
Well, what happens is they're not delivering against any strategic priorities. So a lot of the times, if you talk to large corporates or large government agencies and you go down the layers, they haven't ever been consulted with. They don't even understand their purpose. And then they feel completely disengaged by the strategic intent.
I know purpose and mission and vision gets thrown around a lot. And we've got this culture here and we're all focused on the mission, but you start to ask around and nobody really knows what it is.
Now, after the
pandemic, how important is it going to be for these businesses, along with their staff, to get back in contact with the vision and the mission and the purpose? What's going to be the difference?
It's probably the number one area where they need to focus on. Obviously, focusing on from a customer perspective across the board, like what do their customers want? And also listening to their frontline staff, getting everyone involved, and actually allowing the time for people to be a little bit more strategic rather than being operational or tactical focused the whole time.
So people are getting burned out. We've been introduced with this new external factor, which is called COVID, and it's an external constraint. It's impacting us on the insides of the business. For individuals, if they've got low emotional intelligence, if they have low self-awareness, they may not even realize they're burned out. How can an individual self-assess to start with? How can they understand that things have changed for them and perhaps they are going towards burnout?
I think by recognizing that you're not sleeping, you're not exercising, that you're not engaged at all, and you completely lack energy is probably the number one or the signs that you would recognize as an individual.
I remember one of my signs of disengagement. I was working with Emirates Airline and I co-led a team of 17,000 cabin crew. And my eyes went grey around here and I turned into, and I looked like a panda bear.
Yeah, that's definitely a sign.
Always,
Yeah,
and all these skin things I was buying, and it didn't do anything. But there was a lot of fatigue. There was a lot of burnout because all of a sudden we'd gone through the GFC, and we had fewer cabin crew on the aircraft, but we had more responsibilities. We had the same amount of customers, but we were missing 5 crew members every flight, and so you could feel the fatigue on the aircraft. And one of the things that I saw, Kris, was disengagement. Was you'd start to hear this new language from the cabin crew, and they'd say, "Daniel, I'm going to treat the customer how the company treats me."
yeah,
And I
and
would say,
yeah,
"How do you do that?" And when they were boarding the aircraft, you know what the cabin crew are like. Instead of
yeah,
focusing on the customer, they're looking at their nails, they're
yeah,
checking their hair, they're looking at the ceiling.
yeah. That's
And
absolute disengagement.
it's amazing. What about emotionally? You've mentioned EQ here. What are you seeing in terms of emotional intelligence? How's this impacting them for themselves and for others?
I think that without having the emotional intelligence, it's really hard to actually pick up some of the challenges that people are actually feeling. I think everyone is looking for leaders to like hone in on their EQ skills to recognize and to empathize with what they're going through.
Mm,
Everyone has a different level of how they've experienced the pandemic. I've really seen a shift even in the last 6 weeks of the whole command and control leadership style has really evolved from the fact that the people or the employees just don't have the patience for it.
mm,
There's no capacity for that style anymore. They're looking for leaders to really, reflect, I guess, what's going on. Communication is key because everyone is up in arms of like, when am I going back to work, as into the
mm,
office?
mm,
And how am I actually going to explain to my customers, to my people, exactly what's going on when I don't really know?
mm. Jacqueline Haley's joining us here from the UK, and she says, speaking to many working people from home right now, they are overwhelmed by the thought of no end in sight. Energy levels are so low, morale, and as Kris said, lack of energy. Jacqueline, one of the things that's really interesting is with motivation, only 15% of our motivation comes from our successes in the past. And fully 85% of our motivation comes from what we anticipate's going to happen to us in the future. Unfortunately, because there's no end in sight, our mind looks towards the future and it says, hey, what's happening out here? But it's
Yeah,
like a blank slate. And because there's nothing out there, there's nothing, what Edward de Bono talks about is immediate, short, medium, or long term. Because there's nothing out there, you can't get motivated. Well, you can, but it's just incredibly hard because there's nothing to work towards. And so if we get back to that ABC model of motivation, antecedents, and behavioral consequences, 85% comes from the future, but there's nothing there. So leaders, in my opinion, Kris, they have to set the vision. Are
yes.
they doing a good job at resetting the vision at the moment? Are they changing it from long-term strategic visions to shorter-term tactical? What are they doing there?
I think that the challenge is a lot of them are experiencing burnout.
Mm,
So they don't even have the capacity to think about vision. And so they really need to start thinking about, how do I actually look at myself and how I can be more effective. I always say it's kind of like being an athlete. It's all about energy. You've got to fuel your mind, you've got to fuel your body, and you've got to like work out how I can be as effective as possible. I can't tell you, Daniel, the amount of times that when I talk to execs, they spend hours in meetings and emails with no agendas and no outcomes. That would be enough to do my head in. Do you know what I mean? Like, they do wait. There's a lot of waste throughout workforces.
I could imagine. With the impact of burnout, what do you see are the financial impacts of companies not solving this issue right now?
Obviously, there's a financial, like obviously profit would be number one. From a government perspective, it's even wider because they're not getting any economies of scale or even delivering against policies. And obviously, now larger corporates, they're not obviously delivering what they need to from their shareholder perspective.
And what about a non-financial impact? What does this do to the overall culture, and what does it do to the company's reputation when their people are burned out and they choose not to do anything about it?
Well, the challenge is there's skill shortages too across the board. And so it becomes, most employers want to be employers of choice. So if they start getting a terrible brand or employer brand, then they're not going to hire. And then, of course, there's an impact to their customers.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing from Kris Grant, the CEO of ASPL, former leader of 50,000 staff across Asia Pacific, and she knows what she's talking about. And I want you to take this information away and I want you to apply it to your business. Whether you're a small business and employing one or two people, or you're employing thousands of people, this information can give you a competitive advantage in your marketplace. Kris, I really appreciate you sharing that. And before I let you go, I want to ask 5 questions. For you, as a CEO, a former leader of 50,000 people, what frustrates you the most?
I think what frustrated me the most was the waste, as I said, of the amount of meetings, the conflict of priorities, and even when I was, a young C-level, my first C-level, you want to change everything. And you've got to learn to harness your own energy and what you can actually influence and what you can actually do.
And throughout your career, what's been your most embarrassing moment? I split my pants when I was cabin crew and I had to do a full 12-hour service with everybody seeing my bottom. What was your most embarrassing moment?
I think one of my most embarrassing moments was when my young daughter, Amy, contracted gastro, and I actually threw up all over my boss. That was not my greatest moment.
I'll tell you a quick one about gastro. I went to Malaysia, did a presentation to 350 people, come home, took some supplements, took these pink vitamin B tablets. 3 days later, I'm in hospital thinking I had COVID-19. Went for the checkups, clean bill of health, come home, put my hand back into the drawer, went to take 2 of these small pink tablets, and my wife said, "Daniel, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking your vitamin B tablets." She said, "Sweetheart, they're my laxatives."
Oh, no.
3 days, I'd taken 18 laxatives.
No.
I thought I had COVID-19.
That's so great.
It's crazy. And for you, what one book has had the most impact on your life?
I think The Power of Now. Like, I'm all about consciousness and really developing and heightening. We offer a neuroscience leadership program. I'm all about how do you optimize yourself, and I'm all about the whole self-empowerment.
And on your way to the top, going through having 2 children, 50,000 people, staff under you, what's the biggest mental or emotional block that has held you back personally?
Apart from the glass ceiling, being a female, I definitely when I was younger, and I'm still prone to it, being a high achiever, you put so much pressure on yourself, but definitely the overthinking.
And for the ladies who are coming up against these glass ceilings,
Yeah.
what advice would you give them from one female to another female in the workplace who feels capped with that glass ceiling? What advice do you have for them?
I feel like being authentic and being yourself is probably the number one piece of advice. I feel there is always a component of women should support women more, and looking for mentors and coaches that can kind of guide you through and not giving yourself a hard time, whether it's your family or not doing enough for work, like that whole lean-in concept, I think is still really relevant.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been joined by Kris Grant today, and she's really shared some interesting strategies and new ways to think about getting through the pandemic and dealing with burnout. So, Kris, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. I know you're a very busy lady, so we'll let you go, and we hope to see you again one day out there in the future. Thank you, Kris.
Thank you so much. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day.